Hello and welcome to English Not Permitted, the only channel on YouTube dedicated entirely to foreign language film, TV shows and books. In today's video, I'm going to review the film Aguirre, Wrath of God. Now, this film is ranked at number 17 on the BBC Top 100 Films list. I'm currently reviewing every single film on this list, so please like and subscribe to the channel if that sounds like something you'd be interested in. Now, this film I was very excited to watch. This was one of the films that really jumped out at me when I was looking through the list. And I can say that this film mostly lived up to expectations. So this film was made in the 1970s, and it was directed by Werner Herzog, and starring as the main character is Klaus Kinski. I'm going to give you my review of the film. First of all, let's talk about the plot. What the hell is this film all about?
Set in 1560 in the newly conquered Incan Empire, the film follows a group of conquistadors sent by the Spanish leader Gonzalo Pizarro on a dangerous and deadly march down the Amazon in search of El Dorado, the fictional Andean city made entirely of gold. The group consists of an interesting mix of roles and personalities that existed at the time. The team is led by Don Pedro de Azúa, with the titular character and protagonist Lope de Aguirre the second in command. Along for the journey are nobleman Don Fernando de Guzman, brought along to represent the interests of the Spanish crown, Brother Gaspar de Carvajal, a monk whose role it is to spread the Christian faith to the natives, Okello, an African slave, Azúa's mistress Doña Inés, as well as a number of captured Incans, including a former Incan prince who functions as a translator. This film was shot in the Peruvian jungle, and the wild nature of the jungle itself begins to become a threat of its own to the conquistadors. The film opens with beautiful sweeping shots of Andean landscapes and the men and women tiredly trekking across these great distances. Early on in the film, we see a group caught on a raft on the other side of the river, unable to escape the rapids or swim to safety. Dangers paralleled in the human threats both from the defending Incan soldiers and within their own camp of conquistadors. Protagonist Aguirre is a quiet, calculated, ambitious and ruthless leader, and we rarely hear from him at the beginning of the film. Only when there is talk of heading back to safety does he rise up and take control, rallying the men to move forward into danger in search of gold and glory. It is clear that many in the group consider him to be a madman and live in open fear of the man and his decision-making. This film is not only a dark portrayal of conditions that the early conquistadors faced as they trekked through unfamiliar terrain, but also of the ruthlessness of the men that succeeded, and some of the brutal measures they were willing to take in search for fame and riches.
So, review time. What did I think? Well, like I said, I had high expectations going into this film, and initially they were a little bit unfounded. I found it a little bit slow to get going, but once it did, this film was brilliant. I think in the beginning I'd expected this to be a bit more of an adventure film, and that wasn't really the case. This is quite a dark and grisly film. This film is really about the dark side of humanity and the measures that people are willing to go to in search of fame and glory. And that's characterized best in the lead character, which is Aguirre. So what did I like about this film? Well, first of all, I loved the mix of characters. I'd assumed because Aguirre is the title character that he was going to be the main character or perhaps even the only character of the film. That's not the case. Now, I'm interested in the time period. I've read a couple of books about the Incan Empire and how Pizarro conquered it. So this film really brought to life the period for me. So in the film, you can see kind of a mix of motivations. Obviously, the monk, he wants to spread religion to the Incans. We have people representing the Spanish crown, and they're there to promote the king of Spain. One of my favorite characters was the African slave, Okello. He's just someone that's just trying to survive. And I thought it was interesting that he continues to mistreat some of the Incans in order to kind of work his way up in the society. And of course, simple personal gain. There's plenty of characters just doing this for the gold and the glory. I like that it did attempt to show some of the perspective from the Incans. There's one character who is a former Incan prince, and he functions as a translator, and you really kind of get to see the pain and suffering caused to him and his family, and how his family has fallen, as he's now a slave of the Spanish Empire and he has to turn against his own people in order to survive. This could have been done a little bit more though. He could have had a bigger role, or we could have got to see what some of the other Incans had to say and thought about this as well. Overall, I thought it was a pretty nuanced, if negative, take on colonialism. It doesn't paint a pretty picture of the conquistadors. You do get to see in the film all the pain they caused to the Incans as well as themselves. One of the things that's interesting to see in these side characters is how they also go against their own interests. For example, the monk has someone executed for blaspheming against God. The people representing the Spanish crown quickly turn against the crown at the thought of making more money. So it's also about how people go against their own nature. And the actors in these roles all do a great job because they got to do a lot of work in this film. The main character is actually quite a stoic and silent character. So the side characters do a lot of the work for you by showing how they react to the main character and his decisions. As you can imagine, it must have been a nightmare for the conquistadors trying to trek across this terrain, having to deal with mountains and rivers and how to cross them and how to survive on them. The lurking danger of the enemy at any point nearby who knows the terrain much better than you and could attack at any time. Also, drought, flooding, starvation, all of these would be real dangers in the jungle, and this really comes across in the film, and the jungle just comes across as this really lurking menace that can strike out the cast at any time. And again, the cast do a really good job of reacting to it and seeing their fear and paranoia as the film progresses. So let's talk about the performance of the main actor, Klaus Kinski, in his role as Lope de Aguirre. Well, I think Kinski does a lot by doing a little. He's very quiet and stoic for most of this film, with the occasional outbursts that show you kind of the desperation of the character he's playing. And this helps to show you the two sides of the character which I think are most important. How calculated he is, and his viciousness and willing to do whatever it takes to get what he wants. In his stoic scenes, Kinski does a lot with his face to show the kind of meanness of the character. He's got a pretty scary face, and he really fits the role of this kind of domineering and ruthless leader. In a lot of ways, this film reminded me of the film Apocalypse Now, and you could imply that Aguirre is similar to Colonel Kurtz in the film, except obviously in Apocalypse Now, you don't really follow Colonel Kurtz. But in this film, we are following him. He just kind of hangs around in the background a lot of the time, and you kind of get to see his madness progress as the film goes on. And it's amateur analysis time now. I want to talk about some of the symbolism in the film. There's some really great use of symbolism in this film, especially the use of animals. At one point, we get to see the mice eating its young, and this is a really grotesque demonstration of how the group turns on each other. Towards the end of the film, you get to see the monkeys take over the raft, and I think this represents the chaos of the mutiny. You've kind of got these monkeys running around wildly, and it's kind of a representation of what went on in the mission. I really love the image of the ship being stuck in a tree. I think it's implied that it's a dream or hallucination, but I think this does a lot to represent how isolated and stranded the group is, and how there's no going back from here. So was there anything I disliked about this film? Well, in short, not a lot. Like I said earlier, this film takes a little while to get going. It maybe could have done more in the beginning to kind of keep me interested. Actually, when I first watched it, I was blown away by the opening sequences of the jungle. However, they go for quite long stretches without dialogue. This is quite a minimalist film, which kind of set the pacing off a little slowly in the beginning. But once you're about a third of the way into the film, that kind of goes away as the plot begins to develop and the characters really kind of begin to introduce themselves. Apart from that, I've only got minor niggles about the film. There was kind of lack of variety of the different types of shots. There was a lot of static shots where the camera wasn't moving a lot. I think this kind of helped to play into like the drawn outness and perhaps it dwelled too long on some of these shots. However, I can imagine it must have been very difficult to film this in the jungle or add camera movement to it. So maybe I got to let them off for that. Some of the effects look fake, especially the blood. The blood very clearly looks like paint. It doesn't really look like blood. But I think you just kind of got to accept this film was made in the 1970s and they did the best they could with what they had. Also, it's notable that this film was actually filmed in English because that was the only language that everyone in the crew spoke. But then I believe the quality of the recording wasn't very good, so they had to re-record it, and they only had the money to do this in German. So you can notice the way their mouths move doesn't always correspond to what they're saying. Again, this takes a minute to get used to, but it's fine after a few minutes. Finally, and this is very nitpicky, the actor Klaus Kinski is supposed to be playing a Spaniard, but he has about the most German-looking face I've ever seen, and he doesn't look very Spanish at all to me. Okay, that's it for my review of the film. Aguirre, Wrath of God, number 17 on the BBC Top 100 Films of All Time list. In my next video from the BBC Top 100 Films list, I will be reviewing La Strada by Federico Fellini. I think it sits at number 83 on the list. Federico Fellini has 4 films in total on the BBC Top 100 list, and this will be the first one I'm reviewing. Thank you very much for watching. Please let me know what you think of this film in the comments below. If you like what I'm doing here, please give me a like and subscribe. Thank you very much, and goodbye.